As viewers of the channel will know, and also if they don't, Christmas, or Yule as it's called by its proper name, is of course a winter solstice festival celebrated in the darkest time of the year. And as Finland is a place largely associated with this festival, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about the customs and their origins when it comes to Yule. Yule is of course still celebrated with a great feast with lots of food. Many of these foods that we consider traditional, like the horrible root vegetable syrupy baked things or the ass of a pig that is roasted in the oven, are in fact not that traditional, or depends of course how you define traditional. Much of the modern Christmas foods come from the 19th or even 20th century. Things like rice porridge or ham were not common back in the days in the Middle Ages or a bit later. So in this video I thought to recreate some what could be medieval or early modern age foods that could have been eaten during the winter festival. So I will start with what else but what we don't have in the picture, and that would be meat and fish. As I said, ham is a modern thing, so forget about that. But instead, what they would do is they would choose an animal, probably a pig or a lamb or goat even, might have been more common back in the day, to be slaughtered for Yule, and then it would be fed and taken care of particularly well, so it would then taste good or something. We have to understand that food was a lot more scarce back in the day, so to have a whole animal slaughtered for the occasion was something special, especially for the peasant and farming houses. In the Middle Ages, at least in England, monks sure as hell were eating a lot of meat and good food. You could even say they were committing the deadly sin of gluttony on a daily basis. And if we listen to the crappy Christmas carols that are still played today, they say a lot of stuff about how it's amazing to have so much food to eat now, which was not granted back in the days when dying from famine was a popular activity sometimes. I imagine the meat would be cooked either by roasting or some kind of stew or broth, or even simply boiling, which is something we look down upon nowadays. In the Middle Ages, there was not really a division into sweet and savory dishes as we have today. And you could have, for example, a pie with pork and fruit and sweets all in one, and it made sense to the flavor palette of the medieval person, or a modern American person, I guess. Another thing to note about Yule foods of the past is that there was not really a unified cuisine for the whole country of Finland or Sweden as it was back in the day. But it was more like each house prepared whatever they considered nice, important foods for the important feast. So it could vary a lot from house to house and certainly region to region. And these root vegetable casserole baked abominations that are eaten nowadays, I think those are Tavastian or Bothnian traditional feast dishes that were then adopted to Yule much later. And Yule itself is something that sort of replaced the harvest festival Katri gradually. It was first adopted by the elites and rich people, and then later on by the peasants and farmers as well. Most of the traditions of the Katri, however, were passed on to Yule as such. It was a magical time in which the border of our world and Tuonela or the other world blended or blurred, and spooky things could happen. And there's a lot of beliefs related to that. For example, the master of the house not being allowed to leave the house at certain times or something like that. Also, getting drunk was important. It was in fact key to the success of the harvest the following summer. Speaking of harvest, we have here this root vegetable that I think in English can be called sweets. It is a child of cabbage and turnip, I think, and it tastes more like turnip. I've baked it in the oven with honey and butter and some salt. And it's this thing that has certainly traumatized a lot of kids from crappy foods they ate in their childhood. But if you prepare it like this, it actually becomes really tasty. Now, besides the meat, fish could also be eaten. One food that still survives to this day, although somewhat struggling from the Middle Ages, is the Helkala. I think Lutefish it's known in Swedish. The preparation of which was as much chemistry as it is cooking, so it was an important skill for the lady of the house to master. Now, I couldn't find one from the local Lidl, so I cannot demonstrate, but it's basically a very mild flavored fish, but a lot of people seem to not like it. I guess it doesn't really fit the modern palate anymore. Things like dairy and cheese would be more appropriate for midsummer, as according to my very limited knowledge of cows, that's when they would have babies and then produce milk in the summertime, so you could have cheeses and milk dishes. However, I have used milk in preparation of what we have here, oat porridge. And by oat, I mean barley. It's one of the... Now, while this was something that was eaten very much on a daily basis as well, for Yule it might be prepared with finer ingredients like milk if there was some left, or a bigger load of butter. And if you want to make this yourself, it's very easy, but I do advise buying these pre-cooked, broken down grains of barley if you don't want to be cooking it for the whole night. Another thing important for Yule, as well as any other celebration, is of course the bread. Now, bread was also something that was eaten pretty much daily by peasants, as well as lords and knights and priests and whatever. However, for a special occasion like Yule, it could be of a finer sort. For example, here I have used the finest white flour, which nowadays is just a basic flour. And ironically, you have to pay more to get the nutritious full grain flour that the peasants would have used in the past. And white flour was really only for the rich residents of castles and such, or manors. Traditionally, bread was shaped with a hole in the middle, and they were then hung on the roof to dry. And I think it was in eastern Finland where bread was typically only made once or twice a year, and then they would dry the whole batch there to be eaten later. Could have been western too, I have to double check.
Turns out it was western Finland where this hard bread was eaten.
Speaking of bread and flour, we have here then a sweet, a medieval sweet, the recipe of which comes from the book Keskiajan maut, which if you read Finnish, I can highly recommend. These are little cakes flavored with honey and lingonberries. As far as I know, honeybees do not live in the Finnish woods natively, so they would have been farmed, making honey something really precious. So only, again, the richest of people could afford things like white flour and honey for something so exquisite. When it comes to medieval feasts, the foods would all be served banquet style at once. There were no first courses and desserts or whatever. And as I said earlier, the palate was more mixed to include sweet and savory flavors at once. And then you would pick whatever you fancy. Now, one important note for Yule and Katri is that you have to keep the house elves, or gnomes as we would call them nowadays, tontut, which comes from Swedish, but anyway, you have to keep the elves of the house happy. Now, every house has an elf or a couple that take care of it, and you have to be on good terms with them. Otherwise, misfortune might fall upon you. So, what do you do on Yule is that either before or after the humans eat, you have to leave the food on the table so the elves can go and have a meal. Also, sacrificing something might be a good idea. In addition to food, you should also leave the first slot in the sauna, or the last, for the elves, because apparently they are much like us and enjoy food and sauna. Another crucial thing for the Yule table is of course the ale. A special batch of ale would be brewed for Yule specifically, and as I said earlier, getting drunk was a huge part of it. I do believe that the drunkenness is a bit of a later addition to the Finnish culture than the Middle Ages, and it definitely increased with the adoption of potato, as vodka could be made from it, and the ale in the Middle Ages, as well as wine, which was a drink for the richer people once again, was much milder than the beers nowadays, and it was very much used to supplement the calorie intake as well as vitamins. And depending on where you lived, certainly in the cities, it was of course cleaner to drink than water. But it's not like all the wells were contaminated and drinking water was dangerous, as you might imagine from pop culture and whatever. Well, this has been a short video with some historical Christmas or Yule foods, which you can also try to make if you're bored of ham and root vegetables, gingerbread, whatever. If you do make some of these, or if you have tried, let us know your thoughts and prayers in the comments as usual. And if Finnish mythology and history are close to your heart, see a cardiologist as always, and then check out my other videos. Also, compared to the longer history and mythology videos with a lot of illustration and such, this was a light, fun episode to make, which I might like to make every now and again, but that of course depends on how you found it. So, is food history something you'd be interested in at all or not? Let me know. Otherwise, I will see you again in the next episodes. What we have coming for the new year is of course the continuation of the History of Finland project, which is now approaching the 19th century and soon even independence. But before that, we have of course the basic stuff of famine, misery, poverty, whatnot. Not so many wars in the next episode. That's refreshing. Other than that, Kalevala Day is of course coming again in February. And while I have slowed down a little bit on the animated Kalevala series, as it is a lot of work to produce and slightly less popular than I would like compared to some other videos that don't take that much effort to make. But I would still very much like to continue it, because for the 3 of you who actually watch them, they seem to be very well liked. And I have so many other ideas for videos that I would like to make, however I do not have the time. If, however, it happens again that another 2023 happens and I have very little work, for those of you who might not know, I'm an entrepreneur or a freelance animator, and this YouTube thing is very much a thing I do on the side for fun. But if another dry season with work happens, I might be very tempted to just say fuck it, put all the eggs in the basket of YouTube and see if that kicks off. That would then allow me to spend more time and effort doing this, which is what I really like. I mean, a lot more than doing ads for sure. But yeah, speaking of Kalevala, another special episode is in the works for that, so stay tuned. Other than that, I'm working slowly on a video about the Finnish hill forts, so these ancient Iron Age or Bronze Age even medieval castles, but that is still taking its sweet time, just to give you a heads up of what to expect. Also, there are at least one very exciting collaboration coming up. Other than that, thanks everyone very much for another pretty awesome year of Finnish history and mythology on YouTube. Let's see what the next year brings, other than the things I just mentioned. And I am eternally grateful for everyone who tunes in to watch this stuff time after time and leaves comments and shares the stuff to friends and enemies and whatever. I really appreciate it. This is still a small channel, but it's growing pretty nicely. And of course, like I said, some of the videos don't do as well as I would like. But instead of being one of these fucking whiners who complain about the algorithm being against them or bullshit like that, what one can do is just analyze the performance of the videos and see what people actually like, and then try to recreate that in the upcoming videos. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching and all of that, and we'll see you again in the next videos. And so, buy shirts and comics and prints and all of that crap to keep this going and whatever.